Yes, but you don't take the program of the user. Okay.
Yeah, so if you go ahead, Mr. Visser, and then we'll take questions collectively from all members. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, honourable members. It's a pleasure to be here today, and with fresh images of what happened last week in France and elsewhere in Europe, I think that is a good reason to speak about the agencies in the JHA area. The cooperation between the agencies started a number of years ago, but has increased in the last years and certainly in the last actual year, and will even more increase, as my colleague from EULISA will explain later on, during this year. Agencies have the official and strict mandate as is laid down in the regulations that established the different agencies. But if you look at the mandates, it's clear, and certainly for the JHA area, that the mandates are very close to each other and sometimes even next to each other. So the reason to coordinate closely is self-evident, but even things that are self-evident has to be organised. And that's what exactly we have been doing. We have been organising ourselves. We have organised and coordinated our work. It has just been distributed. For the first time, we have made ourselves visible as agencies in the JHA sector, putting us together, including the information and what we are doing. I will not go into the mandate of each of the agencies, because that is a separate discussion, and only concentrate on what we do together. How do we work? How do we coordinate? In the family of JHA agencies, because we feel like it's the sort of family, we have a regular contact starting from the very first step in our work, that is planning of our work programs. We coordinate since a few years the different work programs of the agencies, and we see where there might be areas that are complementary and that we can take on board from each other. We have also been active last year during the end of the Stockholm programme and the start of the strategic guidelines to make a joint document of comprehensive nature to describe what we see from our practical and operational side as agencies as a contribution for those strategic guidelines. Then I will just shortly, because you have seen and received all the documents yourself, mention some of the areas where we have been more intensely cooperating last year. The review of the internal security strategy is an important one. The agencies have worked closely together to present to the Commission, to the Member States, to the Council and to the Parliament their views on what, from a more holistic view, if I may say it like that, is the best approach according to how we experience it in the practice. On the area of asylum, migration and border management, which is a very large and important area touching on nearly all the agencies, there is an important exchange of information, but also ad hoc cooperation when necessary. For example, when the situation in Ukraine suddenly came up last year, there was a joint assessment from Frontex, EASO and later on also Europol to assess the situation just when it happened. We made same sort of assessments on the change of the visa liberalisation regimes, the different ones, to see what the effect is. There is a lot of discussion also here in the House, and to support that we were assessing the situation and sometimes still are. The situation last year in the Mediterranean around Lampedusa resulted in the Task Force Mediterranean. You're all aware of that, and the different agencies are actively participating and cooperating, and there are a number of joint projects in the context of the Task Force Mediterranean where agencies cooperate together. The European Multidisciplinary Platform Against Criminal Threats should be mentioned. The pilot actions between Frontex and EASO on common identification and registration, and more in general, especially EASO and Frontex work closely together in the different areas of migration, asylum and borders, not only sharing even capacity on detecting at an early stage vulnerable groups, but also in making joint trainings and performing joint actions, common actions in different areas, for example in Greece. I should mention the Schengen evaluation mechanism, which is involving the majority of the agencies. Of course, the Smart Borders package involving actually all of us, Eurosur, trafficking human beings. The drug markets report is a very important element that not only affects the agency in Lisbon, but certainly also directly in fact a number of other areas, as you might imagine. The joint investigation teams, and that is the last thing I will say, an important horizontal point that affects all the agencies and involves all the agencies is training. Training is an essential instrument, tool, as you know, to create a common European culture, and we all in our own area are active in training, and a lot of training aspects can be done jointly, and that is exactly what we are doing. Thank you very much.
And now I'm going to return to you, Mr. Garkov, for if you got.
Chair.
Yeah, if you have any further to add.
Of course, I can speak about priorities for this year.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. After the intervention of Mr. Visser, I would like to provide further view to the committee about the priority of the networks for this year. First of all, I need to emphasize that the principles that EULISA will follow chairing the network this year will be continuity, because as you understood, there are lots of things already achieved and done by the network of GHA agencies, so we need to continue building on that. Teamwork, because this will be the most important prerequisite for successful delivery of the priorities, and transparency vis-à-vis our stakeholders and the general public, because this is very important in order to establish the added value of the GHA agencies towards the Union and EU citizens. So, in this respect, the priorities of the network for this year will be spread into 3 areas. First of all, the agency will continue to keep its operational activities in line with the political objectives and particular needs of the Member States and the EU institutions, which means that especially with regards to the external action, with regards to supporting the Member States with training and knowledge transfer, we will continue what we already established in the years before. At the same time, the agency will aim to extend further its contribution to the political debate at EU level, providing evidence based on facts to support the decisions made in the remit of our mandates and based on our expertise. And last but not least, the agencies will continue to develop further and increase their visibility vis-à-vis the stakeholders and the general public and bodies in the Union, as long as, again, it will be important to establish the added value of those agencies towards the Union. In more particular terms, those priorities will be translated in number of operational activities. Part of those activities are already built up on initiatives started previously, such as further harmonization of the training programs and development of the knowledge exchange between the agencies and with the member states, which is very important from our perspective, especially in the context of already mentioned by Mr. Visser, Schengen evaluation mechanism, where we see an opportunity to contribute further and assist the member states into this. Of course, sharing information between the agency will be another priority. The agency, let alone do a lot of analytical work, so sharing that information, complementing it, etc., will be extremely important. And support of the external actions, looking for economies of scale, sharing technology and business processes, for example, common IT systems and shared services, will be also part of the priorities to increase the efficiency of operations of the agencies. Last but not least, the agencies will continue to support and to join the efforts in delivery of strategic initiatives at EU level, like smart borders and any other that will be required, because we believe that the joint effort provides high added value and better results in the long run. So this is in brief. Now I will be glad again to answer questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to both executive directors, and I'll open the floor now, beginning with Carlos Coelho.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much to the two directors for the information they gave us. Mr. Visser made a reference to the new Schengen evaluation mechanism. I would like if he could explain a little bit further in what kind of cooperation between all the agencies are foreseen on the framework of the new Schengen evaluation mechanism. Regarding Mr. Garkov, you know how I appreciate your work and the work your agency is doing. I thank you for the information regarding the security and the efficiency of the systems. I would not expect anything less from you. But in your last statement, you made a reference about the new package of the borders, the smart borders package. And I would like to say, I have already the chance to tell in this committee why I think this project is illegal, because obviously the Commission decided to ignore Parliament's prerogatives and to found this project outside of the regulation of the agency. And regarding that, I have two questions for Mr. Garkov. First, I want to know if the agency director addressed the legal issue, that means the legality of the procedure, and if you think it's right. And secondly, in any event, I know you have organised in Tallinn in the 1st of October a conference on this issue, and at least two speakers doubted that the funding foreseen was enough, and even the timetable schedule was the correct one for this project. I would like to invite you to share your views either on the legality of the procedure and either of the substance, taking on account these remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. Next is Mrs. Revo.
Sorry, pardon, excusez-moi. Przepraszam najmocniej. Dziękuję. Moje pytanie odnosi się do czegoś, co wiąże się z aktualnościami. Zamachy we Francji przypomniały nam, że bardzo ważne jest przyjmowanie prawa na poziomie europejskim, aby lepiej koordynować politykę wewnętrzną krajów, tak aby była większa spójność i efektywność. I Unia Europejska powinna zwiększyć jakość współpracy pomiędzy krajami członkowskimi, zwłaszcza pomiędzy służbami wywiadowczymi. Bardzo proszę na chwilkę zwolnić.
Okay, it's working now. It's working now.
Thank you. Can you begin again?
I repeat?
Yes.
No problem. Thank you. Les attentats en France.
The attacks in France remind us that it is absolutely vital to adopt legislation at European level to ensure that our internal security policies are better coordinated and more effective and coherent. In order to achieve this, the EU has to improve the quality of cooperation between member states, in particular between the intelligence services. We need to improve the collection and exchange of data and also the processing thereof in a relevant way with full respect for fundamental rights and fundamental freedoms. The Schengen Information System, SIS2, can be a very effective instrument in order to monitor the movements made by foreign fighters. Nevertheless, it is not used to its full potential. According to the Commission, a number of member states do not consult it frequently enough. What can EU-LISA do to ensure the best possible exploitation of the resources offered by SIS2 and make sure that member states use the system? And what link does EU-LISA have with Europol and Eurojust? And how does cooperation between these agencies take place? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Next is Mrs. Winberg.
Tack för ordet och tack för informationen.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you as well to our guests for all of this information. Now, usually we hear that the system is fine, but member states don't implement it properly. I think member states should be reminded firmly to properly do their part. Otherwise, they will be held responsible for acts of terrorism occurring in the EU because people have been able to get through the borders easily. If member states say there are technical problems which explain why there is incomplete implementation, and well, this is independently the question of passport controls, but look at what is happening in Turkey. Each member state should be able to respond. It's vital interior ministers should reach agreements, and if they did so at their last meeting, nevertheless we need energetic inspection of people entering the EU, in particular coming from Istanbul. Controls need to be systematic and maintained in the long term. It is quite clear that there are certain countries of origin of terrorism, such as Iraq. We saw what happened with the Kouachi brothers in France. They were already known to the police. Nevertheless, they were able to enter France without being stopped at the border. We do have SIS2, but if it was used how it was supposed to be used, it would have been possible to stop certain people. It's vital that member states should cooperate and discuss new legislation to make sure that these instruments can be made full use of. My question now, what do you think of the way member states are applying the SIS2 system? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ska Keller. Ska.
Thank you. One question to Mr. Visser on EASO. You mentioned that on smart borders, all agencies are cooperating, working together, contributing. Could you explain what EASO's role in smart borders is? And to Mr. Garkov, I have a question that goes in line with what Carlos has been saying. Namely, I understand that EU-LISA is not allowed to do pilot projects when a legal base is already in a way there. Nevertheless, you signed an agreement with the Commission. So I'm also wondering why that was. Did the Commission pressure you, or was it your own free wish to support that? And what do you think about whether that at all matches with your regulation? I think it's very clear that it doesn't. And also because it is very clearly against your mandate. You also said that that you're not sharing data with third countries because that's not your mandate. Now we understand that the pilot project becomes a testing phase and I don't know what, in order to not be a pilot project anymore. And then I'm wondering, what is it potentially that you're calling a data transfer to third countries if it's not called a data transfer because that's not in your mandate. So are we expecting to find more semantic difficulties with other provisions? And I would be very interested to hear your view on that. Thank you.
Some of that answer should be coming from the Commission, of course. I don't know, I mean, we're so squeezed for time. I don't know if we can get the Commission at the end briefly, but I think we should. Next is Mario Lauriston. Mario.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank our guests for information, and also I have to say that I have visited LISA in Tallinn, and I was impressed by the professional level of work done there. My question is about your function, which is mentioned in the brochure, that you want to become, and you are, acknowledged ICT Centre of Excellence and Service Provider. Could you a bit elaborate what kind of analytical work you are doing as a Centre of Excellence in this area? And I am especially interested, I am sure you have knowledgeable about regulation, the data protection regulation draft. And there the very important point is that we have to diminish as far as possible usage of personal data and more use the monitoring, which is not personal data. And the other side is that we have to have the possibility for data protection by default, so inbuilt in technologies. So how far you are also doing some analytical work in this area as Centre of Excellence? Can you provide with knowledge, new technology or something in this area?
Thank you, Mario. And finally, Madame Vergiat.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for the information that you've given us. Now, I was struck by one thing in particular. You announced the various measures that were taken in the field of security, and I wanted to ask you about security for citizens and what's being done on data protection. Citizens' rights being protected as well. This is something that's very important for us here in this Parliament. I think there's a strong majority backing this line. In France, in the wake of the terrorist attacks, there needs to be a balance struck between security and protecting fundamental freedoms. There have been assurances in France made from the government that the necessary lessons would be learned and that there wouldn't be a Patriot Act introduced in the American style. So I wanted to ask you about this. Can you tell us what's going to happen? You've assured us that this platform of agencies is going to be responsible, and you're responsible for the asylum office, but I didn't quite understand what is happening in terms of protecting the right to asylum. This is something that we debate at the moment, and I'm very much concerned about that. And when it comes to the French attacks, let's be careful about how we use this. Mr. Kouachi and Mr. Koulibaly were both French citizens. So I wonder whether the SIS system or smart borders would have helped at all. It's not necessarily the case. What we need is better exchange of information and controls, much more efficient checks, and this is certainly more related to human resources rather than technical resources. Thank you.
Maybe, Robert, do you want to start with Robert Visser, if you begin? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. My colleague certainly will go in a number of questions related to this year's activities and to specific questions on his area. If I see it correctly, I need to answer a few questions. Mr. Cuellar asked about how the cooperation in the Schengen evaluation system, as the agency is concerned, works. Specific action that we have been taken and that we will continue is contributing to the training of the Schengen evaluators. And in that respect, Europol, CEPOL, EULISA, Frontex and FRA, so the majority of the agencies cooperate to make that as solid and as good as possible, also taking into account, and that's why FRA, for example, is participating, the human rights aspect in this area. An important subject, I would say. Of course, as I said in the beginning, the mandate of the agencies is as it is, so we are not touching in each other's mandates. We are only where it touches, where it's linked and complementary, coordinating. We don't take over anything because that needs a legal basis which is not there. The same is for smart borders. Smart borders is a discussion, as Ms. Keller asked, that is very political. It's outside of EASO as such, but if it will be effective, at a certain moment they will produce information. It's not about individuals, because EASO is not about individual cases, but it might produce information that is essential to understand migration flows. And in that respect, but only in the second or third line, EASO in the future might be interested. At this moment, we are not involved in this, of course, because it's still a project that is ongoing. I think this is the subjects and the questions that were asked me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Mr. Garkov.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for questions. I understand the high interest about ongoing preparations and afterwards implementation of Smart Borders pilot. I'll try to address the questions in short and to give an opportunity for further questions. Now, on the legality of the project, because there were a couple of questions on the legality of procedure and the delegation agreement. First of all, I need to mention that the delegation agreement has been signed under the ISF border regulations, and the delegation agreement is just a technical tool which basically sets the rules for implementation of the budget that has been allocated. So there is no other purpose. The real purpose of the pilot is defined in the terms of reference, which was debated in details, including in the Parliament, and I believe that all the recommendations and demands were taken into account into the final text. With regards to the legal form chosen by the European Commission, I'm afraid I cannot comment, because that was choice of the owner of responsibility to delegate the tasks rather than of the agency. I would like only to mention that from our perspective, a pilot represents a broader exercise than what we do at the moment, because the pilot suggests that there will be an end-to-end prototype or something built and tested in all aspects to prove viability of a new system, while now with the task assigned to the agency for this, for Smart Borders specifically, there will not be end-to-end prototype built, but rather than that, only certain technical options outlined in the study already will have to be tested for their viability and for the added value that they may or may not add to the border management processes. So in that sense, in the content of the exercise, we do not see the element of pilot per se. But again, the chosen legal form is not choice of the agency, it was choice of the European Commission, so I believe the Commission can explain that choice later on. With regards to the timing and funding of the pilot, yes, indeed, there were discussions last year when we started the initial preparations. What is the best way to deliver the pilot, given the different options that we had? Indeed, the member states, or most of them, had a preference to run end-to-end pilot, which was not possible, given the time constraints and budget constraints established by the European Commission. So this is the reason why now we have the content of the pilot focused on testing of particular technical options. So in that respect, all the planning and preparations with the member states is ongoing and almost completed. And given the approach, we believe that the funding and the timetable as it stands now is realistic. It is not realistic if we need to build end-to-end prototypes to test it, to come with a foolproof whether such a system will work and how it will work. But in the particular case, as the scope is defined in the terms of reference, I believe the agency can fit into the time and funding allocated. There was also a question about the data transfers to third country, and especially how the data will be, personal data will be handled in the remit of the pilot. I need to emphasize that the pilot will not include processing of any personal or transfer of any personal data by the agency. And this has been discussed with the EDPS. This has been discussed also with the member states, and that was the conclusion. The approach taken for the pilot does not require collection and processing of any and transfer of any personal data from the agency beyond the national borders. So whatever it is done, and it will be done in 12 member states, I think 18 locations, will be done locally, will be done by the member states with involvement by the agency, but the personal data will not be processed and transferred anywhere beyond the purpose for which it is collected now from the border management authorities. So we took very seriously concerns about data protection. That's why we came with this approach. There were a few other questions about use of SIS and how the agency makes sure that it is being used properly. Yes, indeed, SIS is the Schengen Information System is a very powerful tool that can support the efforts to fight foreign fighters or terrorism, and the agency supports its proper use in different ways. First of all, I already mentioned about the monitoring of data quality, because the actual added value of the system is not coming from the fact that it is operational 24/7, but from the quality of the data that the system handles. So we take that very seriously. We continuously monitor the quality of the data and work with the member states to address the issues that we identify. At the same time, we provide on an annual basis comprehensive set of trainings and knowledge exchange to the member states alone and in cooperation with other agencies, precisely with CIPOL. We have a very comprehensive plan for this year, so we assist the member states to build their own national capacity to use better the system and to make the best use of its capabilities. And last but not least, the agency is also participating in the Schengen evaluation, where we provide our expertise as body responsible for the agency. We look at the way the Schengen Information System is being used and secured at national level and provide our input in the remit of the evaluation. So those are the ways the agency actually employs to assist the member states and make sure that SIS is used properly to its full capacity. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Garkov. Mr. Diaz de Mera, you had a very brief point because we have to conclude.
Sí,
Thank you very much. I wanted to come in, having heard to the Commission, having listened to the Commission, I wanted you to know, Chairman, that yesterday there was a shadows meeting, of the rapporteurs and shadows on Frontex, and we're working on this. There was a very wide-ranging debate on the way we move to the pilot phase, and I listened with interest to what Mr. Karkov had to say, but before reacting, I did want to listen to the Commission's comments. If that's possible, Chairman, could I wait till we've heard from the Commission and then take the floor?
We're in such a difficult position because we have two agenda items, and all the guests are already here. I'm in real trouble because we overran the first item so badly as well, but I'm just looking at where's the Secretariat? How much trouble am I in? I'm in so much trouble that it probably doesn't even matter now. I think a coordinators meeting is even slated for 12:30. I wonder if they can do without me. Probably they can. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. Don't just ignore me. Can we take the Commission? See what authority you have, Mr. Diaz de Mera. You're going to get me into trouble. Let's just take the Commission quickly, really quickly. Where are you?
Okay.
Go really fast, and also answer Ska Keller's point as well, if you can, very fast. And then we're going to conclude this point.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. It's clear that we don't have time for deep legal analysis, but I'll just try to explain in very short terms how the Commission interprets the situation. Article 9 of the establishing regulation of EULISA indeed, and that's correct, provides the possibility for EULISA to be entrusted with the implementation of a pilot. But it makes a reference in that same article to Article 54.2 of the financial regulation. And that is important because if you check that reference, you will see that this can only be done in case there is no other legal basis available, and in case this pilot is preparing for new legislation. Now, we knew that, we read that, and we checked with our legal service in the Commission and DG Budget in the Commission already early last year to ask, can we use this Article 9 as a legal basis or not? We were strongly advised, even instructed, not to do so, because there is an existing legal basis in the ISF Borders Regulation, as referred to by Mr. Garkov correctly. That's the first argument. The second argument is that this is not preparing for legislation because we already have proposals on the table. It's about testing existing feasibility of existing legislation. And thirdly, if I may add, we also have to accept that this is not a pilot in the proper sense of the word, and this is more than just semantics. And again, it was explained by Mr. Garkov. We do not have a fully defined prototype that we're going to test, because we're still in discussion with Council and with you about what we want to produce in terms of smart borders. We're not yet there. What we're doing now is to test certain technical solutions, elements of solutions at the level of Member States in real-life situations. That is what came out of the technical study. That is what is being tested at the moment under the coordination of EULISA, but it's not a pilot in the proper sense of the word. So these are the three reasons why we did not use Article 9, but actually referred to the existing legal basis of the ISF borders. Thank you.
I mean, obviously, this debate could have gone on, but I really do need to draw a line under it now. I do now, but go.
Well, it's just very, very quickly to say two things. First of all, after yesterday's debate, we decided to ask the Parliament's legal service to provide us with an opinion. Secondly, I want to say that I reject, without prejudice to what the legal service might recommend, I reject these illegal processes. Thank you.
Look, I want to thank Mr. Garkov and Mr. Visser for their overviews of the activities, and we're going to, continue to follow up the working of the agencies. And clearly, we could have gone on with the debate today, but we're squeezed with time. So thank you to you both. I really appreciate it. Thanks again. Thank you, colleagues, for your patience again. And we can move immediately now to the European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction. And thank you to the patients and the colleagues who have been waiting. If we can move immediately, if you're in your place. Thank you. The presentation of the work programme by Wolfgang Gott.